Let's be careful about rewriting history. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick, and first, some housekeeping. This week, I've been a little bit lazy in the submission of daily episodes. You'll have to just take my apology. I do apologize. And I do have new subscribers to welcome. We're now at 55, which is a great number. I like it. It's palindromic. It's a number that speaks strongly. I like that number. It's strong. Feels like I could build a house with that number. And that is the house I will build. Hopefully bigger than 55, but 55 is a great foundation. It's nice and strong. Anyways, thank you for those of you who subscribe. I'm a huge fan of you guys. You don't have to be huge fans of me. I ramble. That's what I do. 10 minutes, I ramble on topics. And today we're going to talk about being careful to rewrite history. Now, this started in a debate I got into with a gentleman on Twitter about the 13 seconds game in Buffalo it was in Kansas City, and it was Kansas City versus Buffalo. NFL football, you don't need to know much about it. The end result is that we got to a point where he essentially said, it doesn't matter your argument. No matter what you guys did, Mahomes was going to win that game because, quote unquote, that is what champions do. That is what champions do. And so naturally, I got tired of arguing with this guy, and I said, wow, you're able to predict champions based on the moment. You're able to just see in the moment. You must make a lot of money betting. Good for you. That's what we call a confirmation bias in other fields. Now, confirmation bias is simply this happened and it supports my argument, therefore, the two go hand in hand. My argument is correct because here is a bunch of stuff that, supports it. We found a bunch of, it's not quite called confirmation bias. I'm conflating a couple terms, but I'm calling it confirmation bias here. He had a result that ended in his favor. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but it ended in his favor. Therefore, it was always going to happen. His argument in the moment that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to win was correct because they won. Keep in mind, at that moment in the game, there was 13 seconds left. I'm sorry, Bills fans. I know I should have trigger warned you, but just stick with me. There was 13 seconds left in the game. The Bills had just scored the go-ahead touchdown, and they were ahead by 3 points. Now, Kansas City was not in any position to try to win this game. They were down deep in their own territory and had to come out of their territory to at least get a field goal and force overtime. Obviously, they eventually did that, and then they won on a walk-off touchdown. In that situation, I would say the probability of success for a team is maybe 1%, meaning that if you played that game 100 times, Kansas City loses it 99 times. What was the 1% of the time? Well, the 1% of the time, as we found out later, was that the Bills sat back in a very soft defensive coverage, meaning they were giving probably 15 yards of space to the receivers to prevent a run for the touchdown. And your receivers successfully broke the first tackle. And that's exactly what happened. Tyreek Hill caught the ball probably 5 to 7 yards off the line of scrimmage, and the first man whiffed on the tackle. Now, Tyreek Hill did go down a little bit farther down the field, but it happened quick, and it gave enough time for the next pass to go to Travis Kelce, who also broke the first tackle and got into field goal range, allowing the Chiefs to force overtime, and obviously in overtime they drove the field and scored the winning touchdown. But in the moment, actually in both those moments before overtime and in the many moments during overtime, the game was not at all certain. And it's not any more certain in those moments simply because the Chiefs won. The in-game probabilities don't go to 100% just because the Chiefs won the game. There is really no such thing as quote unquote, this guy's just a champion and that's what champions do. It's not a thing. Number one, because Patrick Mahomes is not the only player on the Kansas City Chiefs. Number two, probabilities don't go away just because you think they should. Look, the chances of a coin landing heads up or tails up is always going to be 50-50. Depending on the weight of the coin, it sort of flips back and forth 50 and a half. Either way. But just because a coin flip every time you flip a coin is 50-50, it does not mean when you flip a coin, it'll switch every time. Why am I getting a thumbs up? That's interesting. I could flip a coin. It just means that on the whole, you're going to get a 50-50 split of heads and tails. Now, if I flip a coin 100 times, that should mean that I get roughly 50 heads and 50 tails. But it doesn't guarantee it. I flip a coin 100 times, I could get 100 tails, or I could get 100 heads. I could get 70 heads. Probabilities are just that. Probabilities. They are not guarantees. And just because a result comes out in a certain way, it doesn't retroactively make those probabilities guarantees. It just means the cards are breaking your way that day. And just because the cards break against you repeatedly, it doesn't mean you didn't do the right thing. It doesn't mean you didn't do the right thing. And that's the interesting point that I want to get across to my 55 viewers. Doing things on the basis of probability is not always the best strategy, right? Like sometimes you got to take the risk. Sometimes you got to bet the river, not knowing what the river is going to be. For those of you who don't know what the river is, that's a poker reference. And that's when the final card in Texas Hold'em is about to be flipped. You don't know what that card is, but you're going to say, okay, I'm going to bet the river. I'm going to bet my gut on this one. And there's a lot of reasons why sometimes you play that odds and play that risk. And some people win on the river. I won on the river once and took a guy out of the game who was absolutely playing the correct probabilities the whole time. The whole time he was playing the correct way. And that whole game, I was literally just playing my gut. I had no idea. If the bets I was doing were any good. I was just going for broke. And that day, going for broke worked. It worked. Pissed him right the hell off. That was the 1 out of 100 game for me. And not for him. 99 times out of 100, the guy who actually knew and understood the probabilities of the cards won that should win the game. That day, the cards didn't break his way. Not his fault. And he shouldn't deviate from his strategy just because I got the victory that day. My strategy is 100% the wrong strategy. Mahomes and the boys, their strategy that day was 100% probably the wrong strategy. But it didn't matter that day because the cards just broke his way. And by didn't matter, I mean it didn't turn into an optimum strategy simply because the cards broke his way. They simply bet the river, and we've seen that go against teams 100 times. How does this affect your life? If you look around and you see somebody doing something the wrong way and somehow it went right for them, that's not an indicator to you that you should do the same thing because it will not work. Don't bet the river just because somebody else did. Don't deviate from what you see as your optimum strategy just because somebody else deviated and won. Don't go to Vegas and bet your mortgage just because you know somebody who doubled their mortgage by doing that. Make the smart choices. And on average, you'll do much better. And when you're talking about a football game, don't talk about moments as though they are completely foregone conclusions just because the result happened the way you wanted it to. You'll live a happier life and you won't argue with people on Twitter. Hope this ramble helps somebody. I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It was pretty rambly today. But either way, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Y'all have a great day.